time feels like the backdrop to everything in our lives. We age, we plan, we reminisce, but how often do we really think about what time is and how it shapes our experience? And what did the Buddha have to say about time? In this video, we'll explore what early Buddhism says and doesn't say about time and how it relates to our practice, to impermanence, and to our lives. To begin with, it's important to know what the Buddha does not say about certain aspects of time. For the Buddha, there were certain questions that were considered, he says, undeclared, because they aren't beneficial or relevant to the fundamentals of the spiritual life. They don't lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. Included in this list of undeclared questions are those about whether the cosmos, that is the universe, all there is infinite or finite, is everlasting or not everlasting. That said, the Buddha also argues in a number of places that the past, that the universe is discoverably beginningless. As he says, monastics, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Now, the important thing is that the time not having a beginning is different from us not being able to discover a beginning to all things, to beginning to samsara. That is to say, the only thing that the Buddha is saying here is we can't find a beginning, that it's pointless to speculate on a beginning or not a beginning to time because we can't find one, or we can't find its opposite. So it's best simply to leave that question aside. Second, the Buddha illustrates an important difference between the present as it relates to our lives, and the past and the future. In particular, it's the present, and only the present, that is our realm of effective action. As he says, don't run back to the past, don't anticipate the future. What's past is left behind, the future has not arrived. And any present phenomenon you clearly discern in every case. Today's the day to keenly work. Who knows, tomorrow may bring death. That is to say, the past is gone to us. We can't actually see the past. And the future is not yet accessible to us. We can't see the future. All that we can see, all that is truly present to us, is here right now. That's all we have to really work with actively. However, in a different sutta that retells this same point, the Buddha says this and then leaves, and the Sangha asks the monk Mahakachana to explain the Buddha's point in more detail. And Mahakachana makes a very critical elaboration, which is to say that there's really nothing particularly special about the present, about today. That is, we can also, he says, falter in the present just as we can falter with respect to the past and the future. That is, we can falter with it if we become attached to it, the same way we might become attached to something in the past or something in the future. As the Buddha says famously in the Dhammapada, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, having gone beyond becoming. So that is to say that the Buddha's attitude towards these three times, the past, present, and future, is not that one is more special or realer than another, but simply that one is our only place of effective action. Only one is the place that we can actually engage with our practice. And this is indeed a counsel of urgency. That is, as the Buddha says, we saw, tomorrow you may die. You may not have more than the present. You may not have more than today to work with, so work diligently. Also, when discussing time in early Buddhism, or in Buddhism at all, or even really time in Indian religions, it's important to note one difference that it has from a generally Western conception of time. That is to say, in early Buddhism, time is essentially thought of as cyclical rather than linear. That is, in the West, time is often framed or understood in religions and in philosophies as something with an identifiable beginning, a first moment, a moment of creation, and something with what we might term an identifiable end, what's known sometimes as the eschaton, or end of time, the place at which all things will come to be, or come to pass, or come to fruition. Instead, in early Buddhism, time is understood to wander on in various respects with no discoverable beginning, no discoverable end. Samsara itself literally means a wandering on. The metaphor here is often given as the wheel, where things come into being and then pass away. Experiences are pleasant at one point, painful at another point, and then pleasant again. But we have to understand this as not being a kind of a gambler's fallacy that, if you're dealt a bad hand at one time, you're guaranteed or much more likely to get a good hand the next. It's rather that what hands you're dealt depends upon your karmic baggage, depends upon how you've acted in the past, and therefore what karmic seeds have been laid down for you and will come to fruition at a future time or at the present. And, as I say, traditionally this is understood to be a beginningless process. That is, that we have already undergone a beginningless number of lifetimes. A number of lifetimes that is so enormous we cannot even consider counting them. And the Buddha gives a number of similes to sort of get this idea across in the early suttas. For example, he says, if the bones of a single person for a single eon were gathered up, they'd make a pile the size of a mountain. And this simile and many others like it underpin the importance of practice. Because without liberation, again on a traditional early Buddhist understanding, we are essentially trapped in this wheel of samsaric suffering indefinitely. That said, the context of our actual practice is in everyday time, is in our psychological present. We see thoughts and emotions arise. We see them pass. We see experiences coming into our senses and our reactions to them. This experienced time is where our practice takes place. And in this context, theorizing, speculating about a past or a future that goes on indefinitely isn't really very helpful. Instead, what is helpful is to become aware of the ways in which craving and clinging can cause suffering to arise right here and right now. We experience impermanence in all of what surrounds us, and yet cling to what we think of as permanent. We see change all around us, and yet crave for something unchanging. And this brings us around to the concept of the present moment. Some contemporary teachers like to explain this by saying that the present moment is really all that there is. But even this idea, that the present moment is all there is philosophically fraught, is a complex and troubling question. To begin with, in Einsteinian physics, we know from the relativity of simultaneity that there is actually no privileged reference frame in which all beings experience a now at the same time. That is, the present is something that itself is relative. And from neuroscience, and indeed from early Buddhist conceptions of perception, we know that our senses and our brain takes time to process information from the world. And so to that extent, we're always living in something like a little bit in the past, because all the information we're getting and processing is no longer in the specific present in which we live, but in a fraction of a second in the past. Now, the Buddha didn't really engage with these kinds of contemporary scientific theories, at least not directly. That would be an anachronism. However, he certainly understood our tendency to crave for the permanent. He understood the illusion of such permanence. And so the point here in our practice is not to look for some illusory, privileged, present moment that really exists, but rather to understand the ways that craving and clinging arise and pass away. That is, to let go of our fixation on or our craving for a fixed past, present, or future. In a nutshell, the Buddha's understanding of time was both cosmological on the one hand and practical on the other. Cosmologically, the Buddha did indeed reject many very fundamental speculative questions about the extent of time, the extent of the universe. But also, he subscribed to a very dense and important and heavy, we might say, cosmological theory about samsara, this time without a discoverable beginning, this continuous wandering on, this idea of karmic cyclicality based on beginningless karmic causation. However, practically, the Buddha focused on the present moment as the arena of our practice, as the arena of effective change. He gave us a way of living within time so as to minimize suffering and increase wisdom. So the focus for the Buddha wasn't so much on what is time, but rather, what do you do with your time? What are you doing with the present moment right now? So my question for you is, how has witnessing this kind of impermanence changed your relationship to time, or has it? If you want to learn more about the way that present moment meditation was important in early Buddhism, I have a past video about that, the present moment and the way it structures our approach to meditation. I'll leave a link to that video up here on the screen if you haven't seen it. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, consider taking a look at my Patreon page, which is linked up here on the screen as always and down below in the notes, and see if you want to help support the channel and the work that I'm doing. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next video, and meanwhile, all of you, be well.